This thing is all about leverage, particularly when you're dealing with more than $1 billion at stake. So, in your opinion, who does have the most to gain? Is it the PGA Tour side or is it the Saudis?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I think it depends on who you ask. And it is interesting talking with people from both sides the last few days, because I think there is a feeling on the Live Golf side that they will continue on regardless of what happens with these negotiations. I'm not quite sure that's the feeling on the PGA Tour side. And the idea is if they reach, let's say that a deal has been reached in principle for the financial terms, then we actually do have to sit down and get down to the business of how do you make them work together. And I think one of the key phrases that we need to keep leaning into, and I think people need to pay attention to, and this is something that Jay Monahan said 2 weeks ago at Torrey Pines: one umbrella. He wants both tours
One
under one
tour.
umbrella.
One tour was his exact phrase. One umbrella could mean something entirely different.
Exactly. Because if you look at one umbrella, you could sit and imagine a scenario where, okay, one umbrella on where you have both tours still running parallel, separate, but parallel. And maybe you have some cross pollination. You have live players playing in tour events, tour players playing in live events. That to me would be the easiest in the short term. I don't know if that's the option, because to answer your question, I think the leverage goes right now. And I was told this after Thursday's meeting of people who have met Yasser Al-Rumayyan, and they talk about what a shrewd negotiator he is. And I can only imagine being in his very, very expensive shoes, sitting in the White House, where it seems to me the president of the United States is trying to wield an enormous amount of power to get this done. And to sit in that chair and simply to nod and to stick with whatever it is you feel like is the hang up here. And I would say the same thing about Jay Monahan, the commissioner of the PGA Tour, because it seems to me that both sides have some things that they want to cling to, and they're not willing to give much real estate. Because if they did, I think we would have had some sort of agreement and principle. The idea that, and we've had this conversation before, where there's quite a few contracts on the left side coming due at the end of this year. And maybe from the tour's perspective, you do want to wait it out. And you do want to see, is the Public Investment Fund going to double down and re-sign Brooks Koepka or Dustin Johnson or Bryson DeChambeau or any of the other contracts that happen to come out? That's going to be a big paycheck. It's going to be a big check for them to throw out. And so I get it from the tour's perspective that they kind of have time on their side. The other half of this is a lot of whatever exemptions are left for players on LIV to be able to participate in the PGA Tour. They also come due at the end of the year. So if you wait that out, and now all of a sudden we start going into 2026, and let's say there is some sort of deal, and okay, you can come back and play on the status you have right now. There's only going to be a handful of players, and to be quite frank, probably the players the PGA Tour wants back who will have any type of status. You start talking about Bryson, who has 5 years after winning last year's U.S. Open. You start talking about Brooks Koepka, who has years left on winning the PGA Championship. All of these players, Jon Rahm certainly has years left after winning all that he had done. So I think the leverage goes both ways, because certainly we've seen it from the other side that if they really want to come and get someone, and we just had a long conversation about these young players who are up and coming, and there's absolutely nothing stopping Live Golf and the Public Investment Fund just signing more of these players. And then it seems like we would be back to square one. If I had to guess who feels like they have the best leverage right now, it would be the PGA Tour, but I'm not sure if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most optimistic part of this is that everyone is incentivized and motivated to get a deal done. President Trump wants to save golf, wants to say that he fixed golf. The PGA Tour is eyeing 3 to 5 guys who could really help with the commercial appeal of the PGA Tour. That's Bryson DeChambeau, that's Jon Rahm, that's Brooks Koepka. Those 3 players in particular would provide an immediate and tangible boost to the PGA Tour. When it comes to the PIF side, Yasir wants a seat at the table. He wants to be accepted into the golf ecosystem. He wants access with the Saudi PIF to pro sports team owners. He wants to legitimize what to this point has been a $5 billion investment in team golf.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, so can you keep dumping money into a failed economic experiment? Maybe. But when it comes to Saudis, like, you don't amass a $900 billion fund by making poor business decisions. He's obviously a shrewd businessman, and I have confidence that at least another meeting should happen quite quickly. We will recap that meeting on the next edition of the podcast on Wednesday. Make sure you go to NBCSports.com/golf for more of Rex's reporting on that.